The morning Lena Brooks saved Ethan Caldwell's life, she had no idea she was about to destroy her own. What started as a simple act of compassion would spiral into a scandal that would tear through the quiet streets of Millfield like wildfire. Because when a black maid dares to care for her white employer, when gratitude turns to friendship, and friendship awakens something deeper, the town's most powerful families will stop at nothing to restore the natural order. But Ethan Caldwell is about to discover that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And Lena is about to learn that in a place where your worth is determined by the color of your skin and the size of your paycheck, falling in love isn't just dangerous, it's revolutionary. The question isn't whether their hearts can survive the storm that's coming. It's whether they'll have the courage to stand together when everyone they know demands they fall apart. If you're ready to witness a love story that will challenge everything you think you know about courage, subscribe now and tell me what city you're watching from. Because this story is about to get real. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Lena Brooks moved quietly through the house, her footsteps barely audible as she dusted the living room furniture. She had learned to be invisible here, to clean around Ethan Caldwell without disturbing his routine or drawing his attention. At 26, Lena had perfected the art of being present, but unnoticed. She kept her eyes down, her voice soft when she absolutely had to speak, and her thoughts to herself. The job paid well enough to help her mother with bills, and in a small southern town like Millfield, good work was hard to find. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone while eating cereal. He was 29, tall and lean, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about much. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, even in the morning, and his clothes looked expensive even when they were casual. He barely looked up when Lena entered the kitchen to wipe down the counters. "Morning, Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly, moving to the sink. He grunted in response, not lifting his eyes from his phone. This was their usual exchange, brief, polite, distant. Lena preferred it that way. Less conversation meant fewer opportunities for awkwardness. She had been working for Ethan for 8 months now, ever since his previous housekeeper had moved away. The job came through Mrs. Patterson at the employment office, who had warned Lena that Ethan could be particular about things. What Mrs. Patterson hadn't said, but Lena had figured out quickly, was that Ethan seemed uncomfortable around black people in general, and black women in particular. It wasn't anything he said directly. It was the way he avoided eye contact, the way he left rooms when she entered them. The way he spoke to her like she might not understand basic instructions, the way he always made sure other people were around when he had to talk to her about work. Lena understood. She had grown up in the South. She knew how some white folks could be, not mean exactly, but not comfortable either. As long as he paid her fairly and didn't say anything openly disrespectful, she could handle the rest. She sprayed the counter with cleaner and began wiping it down in smooth, circular motions. The kitchen smelled like coffee and the faint scent of the vanilla candle she had lit earlier. Ethan liked the house to smell nice, though he never said so directly. She had just noticed he seemed more relaxed when there were pleasant scents around. "I'll be working in the office today," Ethan said suddenly, startling her. "Try to keep the noise down." "Yes, sir," Lena replied automatically. She finished the counters and moved to load the dishwasher. Ethan's breakfast dishes were always the same: 1 bowl, 1 spoon, 1 coffee mug. He was a creature of habit, which made her job easier. She knew exactly what to expect each day. As she worked, she could hear him moving around upstairs, getting ready for his day. He worked from home most of the time, doing something with computers that she didn't fully understand. He was always on conference calls or typing loudly on his keyboard. Lena moved through the house methodically. She had a system: bathrooms first, then bedrooms, then the main living areas. She saved the kitchen for last because Ethan sometimes came back downstairs for more coffee. In the guest bathroom, she noticed the small houseplant on the windowsill was looking droopy. She had been watering it regularly, but it still didn't look healthy. Plants were tricky in this house, not enough natural light in most rooms. She was dusting the living room bookshelf when Ethan came downstairs, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. He headed straight for the kitchen without acknowledging her. Lena continued her work, running the vacuum in the far corner of the living room to minimize the noise. Through the doorway, she could see Ethan making himself a sandwich for lunch. He always ate the same thing: turkey and cheese on wheat bread, no mayo, with a bag of chips. She was putting the vacuum away in the hall closet when she heard him coughing in the kitchen. At first, she didn't think much of it. People coughed, but the sound continued, growing harsher and more frequent. "Mr. Caldwell?" she called out, concerned. "You okay?" The coughing got worse. She could hear him trying to clear his throat, making rough, choking sounds. Lena dropped the vacuum hose and hurried toward the kitchen. What she saw made her stomach drop. Ethan was bent over the counter, his face red and his eyes wide with panic. He was clawing at his throat, trying to breathe. His sandwich lay forgotten on the plate beside him. "Oh no," Lena whispered. She rushed to his side. His breathing was labored and wheezy, and his lips were starting to look pale. She had seen this before. Her cousin Marcus had severe food allergies. This looked like an allergic reaction, and a bad one. "Can you breathe at all?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Ethan tried to speak, but could only make strangled sounds. He pointed toward his throat and shook his head. Lena's mind raced. She remembered what the paramedic had told her family after Marcus's first severe reaction. Keep the person calm, call for help immediately, and try to keep their airway open. "Okay, I'm calling 911 right now," she said, pulling out her phone. "Try to stay calm." She dialed quickly, her fingers surprisingly steady. Ethan was leaning heavily against the counter now, his breathing getting more shallow. 911, what's your emergency?" "I need an ambulance," Lena said clearly. "I have a man here having what looks like a severe allergic reaction. He can barely breathe." "What's the address?" Lena rattled off Ethan's address, watching as he slid down to sit on the kitchen floor, his back against the cabinets. "Is the patient conscious?" "Yes, but he's having trouble breathing. His lips look pale." "An ambulance is on the way. Can you keep him sitting up?" "Yes." Lena knelt beside Ethan, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "The ambulance is coming," she told him. "Just try to breathe slowly." She could see the fear in his eyes. This was a man who was used to being in control, and now he was completely helpless. She had never seen him look vulnerable before. "Did you eat anything new today?" she asked the dispatcher. "I don't know," she said. He was making his usual sandwich, turkey and cheese. Ethan made a weak gesture toward the refrigerator. Lena got up and opened it, looking at the turkey package. It was a different brand than usual, with a label that mentioned it was seasoned with herbs. "The turkey might be different," she told the dispatcher. "It looks like it has herbs in it." Ethan nodded weakly, pointing to his throat again. "How long until the ambulance gets here?" Lena asked. "They're about 5 minutes out." 5 minutes felt like forever. Lena sat on the floor next to Ethan, watching his face carefully. His breathing was still labored, but he seemed a little calmer with her there. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. "Just keep breathing. Don't try to talk." It was strange, sitting so close to him. In 8 months of working in his house, they had never been this near each other. She could see the freckles on his nose, the way his hair curled slightly at the edges. Without the usual distance between them, he looked younger, more human. She found herself genuinely worried about him, not just as an employee, but as a person. The thought surprised her. The sound of sirens grew louder. Lena squeezed Ethan's shoulder gently. "They're almost here," she said. She heard the ambulance pull up outside, then the sound of heavy footsteps on the front porch. The doorbell rang. "Back here," Lena called out. "The door's unlocked." 2 paramedics hurried into the kitchen, a middle-aged white man and a young black woman. They took one look at Ethan and immediately got to work. "What happened?" the male paramedic asked, kneeling beside Ethan. "He was eating lunch and started coughing really bad," Lena explained. "He can't breathe right. I think it might be the turkey. It's a different brand than usual, and it has herbs in it." The female paramedic was already checking Ethan's pulse and looking at his throat. "Any known allergies?" she asked. Ethan shook his head weakly. "Sometimes allergies develop suddenly," the male paramedic said, preparing a shot. "We're going to give you something to help with the breathing." Lena stepped back to give them room to work. She watched as they gave Ethan the injection and fitted an oxygen mask over his face. His color started to improve almost immediately. "That's better," the female paramedic said. "We need to get him to the hospital for observation." As they prepared to move Ethan to the stretcher, he reached out and grabbed Lena's wrist. His eyes met hers, and she saw genuine gratitude there. "Thank you," he managed to whisper from behind the oxygen mask. Lena felt a strange flutter in her chest. "You don't need to thank me," she said quietly. The paramedics loaded Ethan onto the stretcher and headed for the door. Lena followed them outside, watching as they put him in the ambulance. "Are you family?" the female paramedic asked. "No, I work for him," Lena said. "Do you want to ride with us? He seems to want you there." Lena looked back at Ethan, who was watching her through the open ambulance doors. She could see the question in his eyes. "Yes," she said, surprising herself. "I'll come." The ride to the hospital was quiet except for the sound of medical equipment and the ambulance radio. Lena sat on the small bench seat, watching as the paramedics monitored Ethan's breathing. The medicine was working. His color was back to normal, and he seemed to be breathing easier. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Ethan was wheeled into the emergency room while Lena found herself standing alone in the waiting area. She realized she didn't know who to call. She didn't know if Ethan had family nearby, or close friends, or anyone who should be notified. She sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs and waited. Other people came and went. A woman with a crying baby, an elderly man holding his arm, a teenager with worried parents. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. After what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes, a doctor came out to the waiting area. "Are you here for Ethan Caldwell?" he asked, looking around. "Yes," Lena said, standing up. "I'm the one who called the ambulance." The doctor was a kind-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. "You did exactly the right thing," he said. "He's going to be fine. It was definitely an allergic reaction, probably to something in the seasoning on that turkey. We've got him stabilized, and the swelling in his throat is going down." Relief washed over Lena. "Can I see him? Are you family?" Lena hesitated. "I work for him. I was the only one there when it happened." The doctor studied her face. "He's been asking for you. Room 312. Lena took the elevator to the 3rd floor, her heart beating faster with each floor she passed. She had never visited Ethan anywhere outside of his house. This felt strange and personal in a way that made her nervous. She found room 312 and knocked softly on the door frame. "Come in." Ethan's voice was hoarse but stronger than before. He was sitting up in bed looking pale but alert. The oxygen mask was gone, replaced by a small tube under his nose. He looked smaller in the hospital gown, more vulnerable. "How are you feeling?" Lena asked, stepping into the room. "Better," he said. "Thanks to you." There was something different in his voice. The usual distance was gone, replaced by something warmer. "The doctor said you'll be fine," Lena said, staying near the door. "Lena," Ethan said, and she realized it was the first time he had ever said her name. "You saved my life." She felt her cheeks warm. Anyone would have done the same thing. "No," he said, his voice serious. "Not everyone would have stayed calm like that. Not everyone would have known what to do." They looked at each other across the small hospital room, and Lena felt something shift between them. For the first time since she had started working for him, Ethan was really seeing her, not as the invisible maid, but as a person who had cared enough to help him when he needed it most. "I should let you rest," she said finally. "Wait," Ethan said quickly. "How are you getting home? Did you drive here?" "I rode in the ambulance," Lena said. "I'll call my cousin to pick me up." "Don't do that," Ethan said. "I'll get you an Uber. It's the least I can do." "You don't need to—" "Please," he said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. "Let me do this." Lena nodded. "Okay." Ethan reached for his phone on the bedside table, his movements still a little shaky. As he called for the ride, Lena found herself really looking at him for the first time. Without his usual confidence and distance, he seemed more real, more human. When he hung up the phone, they sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "The driver will be here in 10 minutes, he said. "Thank you," Lena said softly. "Thank you," Ethan replied, his eyes meeting hers again. As Lena rode home in the back of the Uber, she found herself thinking about the look in Ethan's eyes when he had reached for her wrist in the kitchen. Genuine gratitude, yes, but something else too. Something that made her feel like maybe, for the first time, he had seen her as more than just the person who cleaned his house. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. 1955. The next morning, Lena stood on Ethan's front porch with her key in her hand, hesitating. She wasn't sure what to expect. Would things go back to normal? Would he pretend yesterday hadn't happened? Would he be embarrassed that she had seen him so vulnerable? She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet, and for a moment she worried that something had happened to him during the night. Then she heard movement upstairs and relaxed. "Mr. Caldwell?" she called out softly. "Down here," came his voice from the kitchen. She found him sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, looking tired but much better than he had yesterday. He was wearing a gray t-shirt and jeans instead of his usual button-down, and his hair was messier than normal. "How are you feeling?" she asked, setting her purse down on the counter. "Much better," he said, and she noticed he was actually looking at her when he spoke. "The doctor said I should take it easy today, but I'm fine." "That's good," Lena said, unsure of what else to say. An awkward silence fell between them. Yesterday had changed something, but neither of them seemed to know how to talk about it. "Lena," Ethan said finally, "I want you to know how grateful I am for what you did. If you hadn't been there—" He didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what he meant. "You don't need to keep thanking me," Lena said quietly. "Really?" "Yes, I do," Ethan said, his voice firm. "And I want you to stay close to the house today, just in case." Lena looked at him in surprise. "Stay close? I mean, don't leave to run errands or anything. Work here, but stay nearby." There was something almost vulnerable in the request, like he was admitting he was scared to be alone. Lena found herself nodding. "Of course," she said. As the morning went on, Lena found herself hyper-aware of Ethan's presence in the house. Usually, he disappeared into his office and she barely saw him until lunch. Today, he kept finding reasons to come downstairs. He needed more coffee. He was looking for a book. He wanted to check something in the kitchen. Each time he appeared, their eyes would meet for a moment longer than usual before one of them looked away. Around noon, Lena was dusting the living room when she heard Ethan's phone ring in the kitchen. She could hear his side of the conversation clearly. "Hey, Tom," Ethan said. Tom Willis was their neighbor, a friendly man who often stopped by to chat. "Yeah, I'm fine. Had a little medical emergency yesterday, but I'm okay now." There was a pause while Tom spoke. "Actually, Lena was here," Ethan said, and Lena froze with the dust cloth in her hand. "She's the one who called the ambulance. Really kept her head in a crisis." Another pause. "Yeah, she probably saved my life," Ethan continued, his voice carrying a note of pride that surprised Lena. Quick thinking and stayed calm the whole time. Lena felt a warm glow in her chest. She had never heard Ethan speak about her to anyone before, and certainly never with such obvious respect and gratitude. When Ethan hung up the phone, he found Lena in the living room. "Was that about yesterday?" she asked. "Tom heard the ambulance come by," Ethan explained. "Word travels fast in a small town." Lena nodded. She knew how gossip worked in Millfield. By tonight, half the town would know that Ethan had some kind of medical emergency, and many would know that she had been involved somehow. "What did you tell him?" she asked. "The truth," Ethan said simply. "That you saved my life." The way he said it, so matter-of-fact and sincere, made Lena's heart skip a beat. That evening, Ethan asked Lena to stay for dinner. Not to cook for him, he ordered pizza, but to eat with him. "I don't want to be alone tonight," he admitted as they sat at his kitchen table with pizza boxes between them. "Yesterday scared me more than I want to admit." "I understand," Lena said softly. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. It was strange, sitting across from each other like this. For 8 months, their relationship had been purely professional. Now, suddenly, they were just two people sharing a meal. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. Lena looked up from her slice of pizza. "Sure. How did you know what to do when I couldn't breathe?" "My cousin Marcus has severe allergies," Lena explained. "He's had reactions like that before. My aunt made sure all of us knew the signs and what to do." "You were so calm," Ethan said, shaking his head. "I was panicking, but you just took charge." Someone had to, Lena said with a small shrug. Ethan studied her face. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. What do you mean? He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to struggle with his words. I guess I never really saw you before, he said finally. I mean, I saw you, but I didn't see who you really are. Lena felt her pulse quicken. This was dangerous territory, personal in a way that could complicate everything. Mr. Caldwell, Ethan, he said, please, after yesterday I think we're past the formal stuff. Ethan, Lena said carefully, maybe we should keep things professional. Why? He asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. Because I work for you, Lena thought. Because you're white and I'm black, and this is the South. Because yesterday might have changed how you see me, but it didn't change anything else about our situation. It's just better that way, she said instead. Ethan nodded slowly, but she could see disappointment in his eyes. Later that night, as Lena prepared to leave, Ethan walked her to the door. Thank you, he said again, for staying. For everything. You're welcome, Lena replied. As she reached for the door handle, Ethan spoke again. Lena, she turned back to him. I'm glad you were here yesterday, he said. Not just because of what happened, but I'm glad it was you. Their eyes met and held for a moment that felt longer than it probably was. Lena felt something flutter in her chest, something warm and dangerous that she tried to push down. Good night, Ethan, she said softly. Good night. As Lena drove home to the small apartment she shared with her roommate, she found herself thinking about the way Ethan had said her name, the way he had looked at her across the dinner table, the way he had defended her actions to Tom on the phone. For the first time since she had started working for him, she felt like he saw her as a real person. It was a feeling she had been longing for without even realizing it. But it was also terrifying. Because seeing each other as real people meant acknowledging that there was something happening between them, something that went beyond employer and employee, beyond the careful professional distance they had maintained. And in a town like Millfield, that kind of something could be dangerous for both of them. The next morning brought the first real test of their changed dynamic. Lena arrived at her usual time to find Ethan already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee. But today there was a second cup waiting on the counter. I thought you might want some coffee, he said when she walked in. Lena stared at the cup. It was such a small gesture, but it felt enormous. In 8 months of working for him, Ethan had never offered her so much as a glass of water. Thank you, she said, picking up the cup. The coffee was perfect. Cream, no sugar, exactly how she liked it. He had been paying attention. As they sipped their coffee, Ethan seemed to be working up the courage to say something. I've been thinking about what you said last night, he said finally, about keeping things professional. Lena set down her cup carefully. Okay. I understand why you'd want that, he continued, but I can't pretend yesterday didn't happen. I can't pretend that I don't see you differently now. Ethan, let me finish, he said gently. I know this is complicated. I know there are a lot of reasons why this might not be a good idea. But I also know that you're the bravest, most capable person I've ever met. And I'd like to get to know you better, if you'll let me. Lena felt her heart racing. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. But the practical part of her, the part that had learned to be careful, held her back. What exactly are you asking? She said. I'm asking if we can be friends, Ethan said. Real friends, not just employer and employee. Friends. It seemed like such a simple word, but Lena knew it wasn't simple at all. Not for them. I need to think about it, she said finally. Ethan nodded, though she could see disappointment flash across his face. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Lena went about her work that day, she found herself watching Ethan when he wasn't looking. She noticed things she had never paid attention to before, the way he hummed quietly when he was concentrating, the way he always made sure his coffee cup didn't leave rings on the table, the way he said, thank you, every time she did even the smallest task. He was being more considerate than usual, she realized, more present, like he was trying to show her that he could be different. Around lunchtime, Tom Willis knocked on the front door. Lena was cleaning the bathroom upstairs when she heard voices in the living room. She tried not to listen, but their conversation carried clearly up the stairs. So, what exactly happened yesterday? Tom was asking. Allergic reaction to something in my lunch, Ethan replied. Throat closed up completely, couldn't breathe. Damn, that's scary. Good thing your maid was here. Lena winced at the word maid. It wasn't wrong, technically, but it felt reductive. Lena, Ethan corrected, and Lena felt a flutter of appreciation. And yeah, she saved my life. Stayed completely calm, called 911, knew exactly what to do. She's a keeper then, Tom said with a chuckle. Hard to find good help these days. There was a pause before Ethan responded, and Lena found herself holding her breath. She's not just help, Tom, Ethan said quietly. She's a good person, smart and brave. I'm lucky she was here. Lena felt tears prick at her eyes. She had never heard anyone defend her like that, so simply and sincerely, without making a big speech about it. When Tom left a few minutes later, Lena came downstairs to find Ethan standing by the front window, watching his neighbor walk across the yard. Thank you, she said softly. Ethan turned to her with a questioning look. For what you said to Tom about me. Understanding dawned on Ethan's face. You heard that? I wasn't trying to listen, but it's okay, Ethan said. I'm glad you heard it. I meant every word. They stood looking at each other across the living room, and Lena felt something shift inside her. Maybe friendship wasn't such a dangerous idea after all. Maybe she could trust Ethan to see her as more than just the person who cleaned his house. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Friends, Lena clarified. We can try being friends. The smile that spread across Ethan's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. It transformed his whole face, making him look younger and more open than she had ever seen him. Really? He said. Really, Lena confirmed, though part of her was already wondering what she was getting herself into. That afternoon, they had their first real conversation. Ethan asked about her family, and Lena found herself telling him about her mother, who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, and her younger brother, who was in college studying engineering. In return, Ethan told her about growing up in Millfield, about his Aunt Ruth, who had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 16. He talked about feeling like an outsider even in his own hometown, about the pressure to live up to his family's reputation. The Caldwells have been in Millfield for 5 generations, he said as they sat on his back porch watching the sunset. Sometimes it feels like everyone expects me to be someone I'm not. What do you mean? Lena asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. My family had certain opinions about things, about people. I grew up hearing things that I'm not proud of now. Lena felt a chill despite the warm evening air. She knew what he was trying to say without saying it directly. And now? She asked quietly. Now I'm trying to figure out who I really am, Ethan said, meeting her eyes. Yesterday helped with that. You helped with that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened around them. Lena felt like she was seeing a completely different person than the man she had worked for all these months. This Ethan was thoughtful and uncertain, trying to be better than he had been raised to be. It was both encouraging and terrifying. Because if Ethan was changing, if he was genuinely trying to overcome the prejudices he had grown up with, then maybe what she was starting to feel for him wasn't completely hopeless. But she also knew that changing your thoughts was easier than changing your heart. And in a small southern town, some changes came with a price that both of them might not be prepared to pay. 2 weeks passed, and the new friendship between Lena and Ethan settled into a comfortable rhythm. They shared morning coffee, had real conversations during her work breaks, and Ethan had started asking for her opinion on everything from what color to paint the guest bedroom to which restaurant in town had the best barbecue. Lena found herself looking forward to work in a way she never had before. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and valued by someone outside her family. Ethan listened when she talked, remembered details about her life, and treated her thoughts and feelings as important, but their growing closeness hadn't gone unnoticed. It was a Tuesday morning when Marianne Holt showed up unannounced. Lena was in the kitchen making lunch when she heard the familiar sound of heels clicking up the front walkway. Through the window, she saw a tall, blonde woman in a designer dress approaching the door. Lena had seen Marianne around town before, but had never met her personally. She knew Marianne came from one of Millfield's oldest families, and that she and Ethan had dated on and off for years. The doorbell rang, and Ethan called from his office. "Can you get that, Lena?" Lena opened the door to find Marianne looking her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I'm here to see Ethan," Marianne said without introduction, stepping past Lena into the house as if she owned it. "I'll let him know you're here," Lena said politely, though something about Marianne's attitude immediately put her on guard. "Don't bother," Marianne replied, heading toward Ethan's office. "I know where to find him." Lena returned to the kitchen, but she could hear voices carrying from the office. At first, the conversation seemed normal, catching up, small talk about mutual friends, but as the minutes passed, the tone shifted. "I heard you had some kind of medical emergency," Marianne was saying. "Just an allergic reaction," Ethan replied. "Nothing serious." "And your maid was the one who helped you?" There was a pause before Ethan answered. "Lena?" "Yes." "How convenient that she was right there when you needed her." Lena felt her stomach tighten. There was something poisonous in Marianne's tone, an implication that made Lena's skin crawl. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ethan's voice was cooler now. "Oh, nothing," Marianne said with false sweetness. "It's just that people are talking, Ethan, about how much time you're spending with her, about how close you two seem to be getting." Lena's hands stilled on the sandwich she was making. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it in the next room. "People need to mind their own business," Ethan said firmly. "Darling, I'm just looking out for you," Marianne continued. "You know how these situations can get complicated. She's probably getting ideas above her station, and that's not fair to either of you." "Ideas above her station?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet now. "What the hell does that mean?" "Don't be naive, Ethan. You've been treating her like a friend instead of an employee, and she's obviously misinterpreting your kindness. It's not her fault. People like her don't understand boundaries the way we do." The silence that followed was deafening. Lena held her breath, waiting to hear how Ethan would respond. This was the moment that would tell her everything she needed to know about who he really was. "I think you should leave," Ethan said finally. "Ethan." "Now, Marianne." Lena heard the sound of chairs scraping and footsteps moving toward the front door. She kept her eyes down, focusing intently on the sandwich as if her life depended on it. "You're making a mistake," Marianne said as they passed through the living room. "Everyone's going to be watching now. Every little interaction, every kindness you show her, it's all going to be analyzed and gossiped about. Is that really what you want?" "What I want is for people to treat Lena with the respect she deserves," Ethan said, opening the front door. "Oh, Ethan," Marianne said with a pitying laugh. "You really don't understand how the world works, do you?" The door closed firmly, and Lena heard Ethan's footsteps coming toward the kitchen. She tried to compose herself, but her hands were shaking. "Lena," Ethan said as he entered the kitchen, "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "It's okay," Lena said quietly, not looking up from the counter. "No, it's not okay," Ethan said firmly. What she said was completely out of line. Lena finally raised her eyes to meet his. She could see anger there, but also something that looked like determination. "Is she right?" Lena asked quietly. "About what?" "About people talking. About me. Getting ideas above my station." Ethan's face softened. "Lena, there's no such thing as a station when it comes to friendship. Marianne is stuck in the past, thinking about the world the way her grandmother did." "But she's not wrong about people talking," Lena said. "In a town like this, people notice things." Ethan was quiet for a moment, and Lena could see him processing the truth of what she was saying. "Does that change anything for you?" he asked finally. Lena considered the question. Did it change anything? The growing friendship between them was already more precious to her than she wanted to admit. But Marianne's visit had reminded her of the reality they were living in. "I don't know," she said honestly. Over the next few days, Lena became hyper-aware of how she and Ethan interacted. When Tom Willis stopped by to borrow a tool, she made sure to be busy in another room. When the mailman commented on what a nice day it was, she noticed his eyes flicking between her and Ethan curiously. The easy comfort they had built was still there, but now it felt fragile, like something that could be broken if they weren't careful. It was Friday evening, and Lena was getting ready to leave when Ethan asked her to stay for dinner again. "I picked up Chinese food," he said. "Enough for two." Lena hesitated. They had shared several meals over the past weeks, but after Marianne's visit, the gesture felt loaded with new meaning. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said softly. "Because of what Marianne said?" "Because she wasn't completely wrong," Lena admitted. "People are talking, and that could be bad for both of us." Ethan set down the bag of takeout and looked at her seriously. "What if I don't care about people talking?" "You should care," Lena said. "This is your hometown. These are your neighbors. And I'm just—" "Don't," Ethan interrupted. "Don't diminish yourself because of what other people think." "It's not about diminishing myself," Lena said. "It's about being realistic. You're Ethan Caldwell. Your family built half this town. I clean houses for a living. That means something here, whether we want it to or not." They stood looking at each other across the kitchen, both of them aware that they were talking around something bigger than dinner plans. "What are you saying?" Ethan asked quietly. "I'm saying maybe we need to be more careful," Lena said. "Maybe we need to remember what our relationship really is." The hurt that flashed across Ethan's face made Lena's chest ache. "And what is our relationship, Lena?" he asked. She wanted to say they were friends. She wanted to say they were two people who cared about each other and enjoyed each other's company. But standing in his kitchen with a bag of Chinese food between them and the weight of a small town's expectations pressing down on them, those words felt naive. "You're my employer," she said finally, "and I'm your employee." Ethan nodded slowly, but she could see disappointment written all over his face. "Right," he said quietly. "Of course." Lena gathered her things and headed for the door, feeling like she was ripping something precious in half. But as she reached the threshold, Ethan called her name. "For what it's worth," he said, "these past weeks have been the best I've felt in a long time." Lena's heart clenched. "For me too," she admitted. "But that doesn't matter?" Lena turned back to look at him one more time. He was standing in the doorway of his kitchen, looking lost and frustrated and sad. "It matters," she said softly. "Maybe it matters too much." That weekend, Lena found herself questioning everything. She replayed every conversation she had had with Ethan, every shared smile, every moment when their friendship had felt real and meaningful. She called her mother on Sunday afternoon, needing to hear a voice of wisdom. "Mama," she said as soon as Clara Brooks picked up the phone, "I think I might be in trouble." "What kind of trouble, baby?" "The complicated kind," Lena said, curling up on her couch. "It's about my job." She told her mother everything: the medical emergency, the growing friendship, Marianne's visit, and her own confused feelings about where the boundaries should be. Clara listened without interrupting, the way she always did when one of her children needed to work through something difficult. "Sounds like you care about this man," Clara said finally. "I think I do," Lena admitted, "and I think he cares about me too. But Mama, it's complicated. He's white, he's my boss, and this is Millfield. You know how people can be." "I do know," Clara said gently. "And I also know that good people are rare, baby. If this man treats you with respect and kindness, that's worth something." "But what if it's not enough?" Lena asked. "What if caring about each other just makes everything harder?" "Then you'll deal with whatever comes," Clara said firmly. "But don't let fear make decisions for you, Lena. Don't let other people's small minds make you smaller." After they hung up, Lena sat on her couch thinking about her mother's words. Clara Brooks had raised 3 children mostly on her own, working multiple jobs and never backing down from a challenge. She had taught Lena to be strong, to stand up for herself, and to never apologize for taking up space in the world. Maybe it was time to stop letting fear drive her decisions. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Lena's uncertain mood. She let herself into Ethan's house at her usual time, unsure of what to expect after their conversation on Friday. She found Ethan in the kitchen, but there was no second cup of coffee waiting. He looked up when she entered, giving her a polite but distant smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. The easy warmth that had developed between them was gone, replaced by the careful politeness they had shared in the early days of her employment. It felt like losing something precious, and Lena realized how much she had come to depend on their friendship. As the morning wore on, they maintained their professional distance. Ethan stayed in his office while Lena cleaned. When he needed something, he asked politely and thanked her formally. There were no shared jokes, no lingering conversations, no moments of connection. It was exactly what she had said she wanted, and it felt terrible. Around noon, Lena was vacuuming the living room when she heard voices outside. Through the window, she saw Ruth Caldwell, Ethan's aunt, walking up to the front door with Mary Ann. Lena's stomach dropped. Ruth was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for having strong opinions about how things should be done. If Mary Ann had brought her into this situation, it meant trouble. The doorbell rang, and Ethan emerged from his office to answer it. "Aunt Ruth," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "Mary Ann, what brings you by?" "We need to talk," Ruth said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had been telling people what to do for decades. They settled in the living room, and Lena tried to make herself invisible while continuing her work, but Ruth's voice was clear and carrying. "Ethan, dear," Ruth began, "Mary Ann has told me some concerning things about your situation here." "My situation?" Ethan's voice was carefully neutral. "With your cleaning lady," Mary Ann clarified, as if Lena couldn't hear every word. "People are talking, Ethan. They're saying you two have become inappropriately close." "Define inappropriate," Ethan said coolly. "Don't be difficult," Ruth chided. "You know exactly what we mean. You've been treating her like a friend instead of an employee, and that's causing talk." "God forbid I treat someone with basic human decency," Ethan muttered. "This isn't about decency," Ruth said firmly. "This is about propriety, about understanding your place in this community and hers." Lena felt her face burn with shame and anger. She wanted to defend herself, to point out that she had done nothing wrong except care about someone who had seemed to care about her in return. "Her place?" Ethan's voice was getting louder now. "Oh, don't be naive," Mary Ann interjected. "She's a maid, Ethan, a black maid in a small southern town. She knows exactly what her place is, even if you've forgotten yours." The words hit Lena like a physical blow. She had heard that tone before, the casual dismissal, the reduction of her entire being to her race and her job, the implication that she should be grateful for any scraps of attention thrown her way. What hurt even more was the silence that followed. Ethan said nothing in her defense, and that silence felt like betrayal. "Furthermore," Ruth continued, "people are starting to question your judgment. The Caldwell name means something in this town, and you're putting that reputation at risk." "For what?" Ethan asked. "For treating an employee fairly?" "For letting her get ideas," Mary Ann said bluntly. "For making her think she's something more than what she is." Lena couldn't take it anymore. She turned off the vacuum and straightened up, her hands shaking with anger and hurt. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carefully controlled. All three of them turned to look at her, and she saw surprise on Ethan's face, as if he had forgotten she was there. "I'm going to step outside for a moment," she continued. "Let you all finish your conversation." She walked out of the house with as much dignity as she could muster, but once she was alone on the back porch, the tears came. All the hurt and frustration and humiliation of the past few minutes crashed over her at once. She'd been fooling herself, thinking that things could be different, thinking that Ethan saw her as an equal, as a friend worth defending. His silence in there had told her everything she needed to know about where she really stood. After a few minutes, she heard the front door close and cars starting up in the driveway. Ruth and Mary Ann were leaving, but instead of feeling relief, Lena felt empty. She waited a few more minutes before going back inside. She found Ethan standing by the living room window, his shoulders tense. "They're gone," he said without turning around. "I noticed," Lena replied quietly. He turned to face her then, and she could see something like guilt in his expression. "Lena, It's okay," she said, cutting him off. "I understand." "No, you don't," Ethan said urgently. "What they said in there, that's not how I feel. That's not what I think about you." "But you didn't say anything," Lena pointed out, her voice steady despite the hurt she was feeling. "When they were talking about my place and what I should and shouldn't think about myself, you didn't say one word in my defense." Ethan's face crumpled. "You're right. I should have spoken up. I should have told them to stop." "Yes, you should have," Lena agreed, "but you didn't. Because when it came down to choosing between defending me and keeping the peace with your family, you chose them." "That's not—" "It is," Lena said firmly. "And that tells me everything I need to know about where I stand with you." She turned toward the kitchen, ready to gather her things and leave. She had fooled herself into thinking their friendship was real. but she wouldn't make that mistake again. "Lena, wait," Ethan called after her. She stopped but didn't turn around. "You're right," he said quietly. "I failed you in there. I was a coward, and I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air between them, and Lena felt some of her anger fade, but the hurt remained. "I know you are," she said softly, "but sorry doesn't change what happened." She continued into the kitchen and began gathering her cleaning supplies. Ethan followed her, watching helplessly as she packed up. "Are you quitting?" he asked. Lena paused, considering the question. Part of her wanted to quit, to walk away from this job and the complications it had brought into her life. But she needed the income, and more importantly, she refused to let Marianne and Ruth drive her away. "No," she said finally, "but things are going to be different now." "Different how?" Lena looked at him directly, seeing the pain in his eyes, but steeling herself against it. "Professional," she said. "Strictly professional. No more coffee together, no more personal conversations, no more dinners. I'm your employee, you're my employer, and that's all." Ethan nodded slowly, accepting the boundaries she was setting, even though they clearly hurt him. "If that's what you want," he said. "It's what has to be," Lena corrected. As she headed for the door, Ethan spoke one more time. "For what it's worth," he said, "these past weeks meant something to me. You mean something to me." Lena's step faltered for just a moment. Then she continued walking, because meaning something to someone and being worth defending were two very different things. And she had learned the hard way which one really mattered. The next 3 weeks passed in painful politeness. Lena arrived each morning at exactly 8 o'clock, worked efficiently through her tasks, and left promptly at 4. Ethan retreated to his office and stayed there, emerging only when absolutely necessary. They spoke only about work, which rooms needed attention, when she would be running errands, whether he needed anything before she left for the day. The easy warmth they had built was gone, replaced by a careful distance that felt like walking on broken glass. Lena threw herself into her work with fierce determination. She scrubbed floors that were already clean, organized closets that were already neat, and polished surfaces that already gleamed. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind off the growing ache in her chest. But she couldn't ignore the changes in Ethan. He looked tired, distracted. She sometimes caught him staring out windows or sitting at his kitchen table with cold coffee, lost in thought. When his phone rang, he answered with less enthusiasm than before. When Tom Willis stopped by for his usual neighborly chats, Ethan's responses were shorter, less engaged. He was going through the motions of his life, just like she was. The thought should have given her some satisfaction, but instead it just made her feel hollow. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed again. Lena was cleaning the guest bathroom when she heard familiar voices in the front yard. Through the small window, she saw Marianne walking up to the house with 2 other women, Jessica Palmer and Beth Richardson, both from prominent local families. Lena's heart sank. This wasn't a social call. This was an intervention. The women didn't bother knocking. Marianne had a key, apparently, and she used it to let herself and her companions into the house. "Ethan!" Marianne called out. "We're here." Ethan emerged from his office, and Lena could hear the confusion in his voice. "Marianne, what's going on?" "We need to talk," Marianne said, her voice bright with false cheer. "All of us." They settled in the living room, and Lena tried to focus on her cleaning. But their voices carried clearly through the house, and she found herself frozen, listening despite herself. "We're worried about you, Ethan," Jessica was saying. "You've been so distant lately." "I'm fine," Ethan replied, his voice flat. "No, you're not," Beth chimed in. "You missed the Hendersons' barbecue last weekend. You turned down dinner at the country club. That's not like you." "Maybe I'm just tired of the same old social obligations," Ethan said. "This is about her, isn't it?" Marianne's voice cut through the pleasantries like a knife. "About your maid," Lena's breath caught. She set down the bathroom cleaner and pressed herself against the wall, her heart pounding. "Her name is Lena," Ethan said quietly. "Oh, honey," Jessica said with exaggerated sympathy. "We heard you two had some kind of falling out. Is that why you've been moping around?" "It's not moping," Ethan said, "and it's none of your business." "Actually, it is our business," Marianne said, her voice turning sharper. "When one of our friends starts acting strange, we care. When he starts isolating himself because of some inappropriate attachment to the help, We intervene. There was nothing inappropriate, wasn't there? Beth interrupted. Ethan, be honest with yourself. You were spending more time with her than with any of us, having meals together, talking for hours, treating her like she was your equal. That's not normal. Lena felt the familiar burn of shame and anger in her chest. These women were talking about her like she was a thing, not a person, like her friendship with Ethan was some kind of contamination that needed to be cleaned away. She saved my life, Ethan said, his voice rising slightly. And that's wonderful, Marianne said patronizingly. You should have given her a nice bonus and a good reference, but instead, you got confused. You started thinking there was more to it than there was. You don't know what you're talking about, Ethan said. Don't I? Marianne challenged. Ethan, think about this rationally. What did you really have in common with her? What could you possibly have talked about for all those hours? She cleans houses for a living. She probably didn't even finish college. Lena's face burned. She had actually graduated from community college with a degree in business, but she had never mentioned it to Ethan. It hadn't seemed relevant to her job. Intelligence isn't about degrees, Ethan said, and Lena felt a flicker of warmth despite herself. Of course it isn't, Jessica said smoothly, but compatibility is about more than intelligence. It's about background, about shared experiences, about understanding how the world works. She was probably just being nice to you because you pay her, Beth added. Women like that, they know how to make men feel special. It's a survival skill. The words hit Lena like a slap. Was that what they thought? That she had been manipulating Ethan somehow, playing on his emotions for her own gain? That's enough, Ethan said, his voice dangerous now. We're just trying to help you see clearly, Marianne said. You got lonely after your parents died, and then this medical scare made you vulnerable. She was there at the right moment, and you projected feelings onto the situation that weren't really there. You're wrong, Ethan said firmly. Am I? Marianne stood up, and Lena could hear her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Let me ask you something, Ethan. If she wasn't your employee, if she was just some woman you met at a coffee shop, would you have been interested in her? Really? The silence that followed was deafening. Lena found herself holding her breath, waiting for Ethan's answer, waiting to hear him say, of course he would have been interested, that her job and her race didn't matter, that he cared about her as a person. But the silence stretched on, and in that silence, Lena heard her answer. That's what I thought, Marianne said, satisfaction clear in her voice. You're confusing gratitude with affection, Ethan. It happens to the best of us. I need you all to leave, Ethan said quietly. Ethan. Now, he said, his voice brooking no argument. Lena heard the sounds of the women gathering their things and heading for the door. Marianne's voice carried back as they left. Think about what we said, Ethan. You deserve better than this confusion. You deserve someone who understands you, someone who can be a real partner in your life. The front door closed, and the house fell into heavy silence. Lena remained frozen in the bathroom, processing everything she had heard. The worst part wasn't the cruel things the women had said about her. She had heard worse. The worst part was Ethan's silence when Marianne had asked if he would have been interested in her under different circumstances. That silence told her everything she needed to know. Whatever feelings had grown between them, they were tainted by the circumstances of their meeting. She was his employee who had helped him in a crisis, not a woman he would have chosen freely. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly turned back to the sink, pretending to scrub the already clean faucet. Lena. Ethan's voice was soft, hesitant. Yes, sir, she replied without turning around. Did you hear any of that? Lena set down the cleaning cloth and finally turned to face him. His face was pale, his eyes full of something that looked like regret. I heard enough, she said quietly. They looked at each other across the small bathroom, and Lena saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. What they said was cruel and wrong. But not entirely untrue, Lena said, surprising herself with her calm tone. What do you mean? Would you have been interested in me if we'd met somewhere else? She asked, echoing Marianne's question. If I was just some woman you met at a coffee shop and you didn't know what I did for work? Ethan opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. The hesitation was all the answer she needed. That's what I thought, Lena said, borrowing Marianne's words. It's not that simple, Ethan said desperately. The circumstances of how we met don't invalidate what I feel for you. Don't they? Lena asked. How do you know what you feel is real and not just gratitude mixed with proximity? How do I know I'm not just grateful to be seen as more than invisible for once in my life? The questions hung between them, unanswerable and painful. I don't know, Ethan admitted finally, but I know that these past weeks without you, without our friendship, have been miserable. Missing something doesn't make it right, Lena said softly. She moved toward the door, but Ethan stepped aside only reluctantly. What do you want me to do? He asked. Tell me how to fix this. Lena looked at him one more time, seeing the genuine pain in his face. Part of her wanted to comfort him, to say they could find a way back to the easy friendship they had shared. But she was tired of being the one who made things easier for everyone else. I want you to think about why it took you so long to defend me to your family and friends, she said. I want you to think about why their approval matters more to you than my dignity. And I want you to think about whether you're fighting for me because you care about me, or because you don't like being told what to do. With that, she walked past him and headed for the kitchen to gather her things. She was done for the day, and maybe done with a lot more than that. As she reached for her keys, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway. Lena, please don't give up on us, he said. There is no us, Ethan, she replied, not unkindly. There's you, and there's me, and there's a job. That's all there ever was. You don't believe that, he said. I have to believe that, Lena said, because the alternative is believing that I fell for someone who sees me as a charity case, someone who cares more about what his friends think than what I feel. She headed for the door, but Ethan's voice stopped her. What if I prove you wrong? Lena turned back to him. How? I don't know yet, he admitted, but what if I find a way to prove that what I feel for you is real, that it has nothing to do with gratitude or circumstances or any of the things they said? And what if you can't? Lena asked. Then I'll have learned something important about myself, Ethan said, and maybe you'll have learned something too. Lena studied his face, seeing determination there alongside the pain. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. Give me a chance, Ethan said. Not as your employer, not as someone you saved, just as a man who thinks you're extraordinary and wants to prove it. How? I don't know yet, he repeated, but I'll figure it out. Lena felt something shift inside her chest. It might have been hope, or it might have been the last flicker of something dying. Either way, she found herself nodding. One chance, she said. But Ethan, if you disappoint me again, if you let someone else speak for you about who I am or what I'm worth, we're done. Not just as whatever this is between us, but as employer and employee too. Ethan nodded solemnly. I understand. I hope you do, Lena said, because I'm not going to keep breaking my own heart to make other people comfortable. As she drove home that evening, Lena found herself wondering what Ethan would do with the chance she had given him. She had learned not to expect too much from people, but something in his voice when he had asked for the opportunity to prove himself had sounded different. More determined, more certain. Whether that would be enough to overcome a lifetime of conditioning and the pressure of a small town remained to be seen. But for the first time in weeks, Lena felt like the story between them might not be over after all.